And it says we're recording. Okay, so here we are, Wednesday morning. I don't know what today is, May 2nd. And our chapter today is Mothers Are Influential, which actually, we're getting into some of my favorite chapters right now. This one and the next two kind of all go together. Next week is Mothers Are Nation Changers, and the week after that is Mothers Are Generation Perpetuators. And these three chapters actually I just really love because it gives us more of a big picture, more of a long-term vision, and helps us pull our minds out of the daily drudgery of laundry and dishes and wiping butts. And so when I think in terms of long term and my children growing older and me becoming a grandmother and then maybe their children's children, and when I allow myself to imagine my future like that, my job as being a mother becomes a lot more exciting, I guess. And not that it's not exciting already, but we know because we're in the trenches of motherhood, but it's easy to just feel like we're in a trench all the time and we can never see our way out of it. So let's get into it. Did you ladies, Carolina, did you read the chapter?
I didn't get to read it, no.
Okay, well, we'll just go over it. And I know Marcia said that she hadn't, but I think you've read it before, haven't you, Marcia?
No, actually, I haven't.
Really? Okay, well, it was an easy chapter. So we'll just go through some of the highlights. Do you ladies have your book?
I do.
Excellent.
I was being lazy, sorry. I'll go grab it.
Yeah, go grab it. So the opening quote on the first page there is, as is the mother, so is the daughter, Ezekiel 16:44. And she talks a lot about God wishing for us to produce these children that grow up to be godly, and how our influence on them can sway them one way or another. And the biggest thing being that how can we possibly produce godly children unless we're trying to walk the walk ourselves? And this is so hard because really our children are just little mirrors of us. And usually the things that are upsetting us about our children's character are a reflection of things that we're not doing well. And sometimes that makes it even more frustrating. And at that point, we kind of have a choice. We can either reflect on ourselves and kind of try to change what we're doing and straighten ourselves out, or it just turns your house into a battle zone. I don't know if you guys have experienced things like that yet, but I do all the time.
Yes.
It says if you have rebellion in your heart towards your husband or any authority, that seed of rebellion can affect your children. Most definitely. Most definitely. So the big print here in the middle, children will learn far more from your daily attitude in the home than they will learn from what you teach them. They will forget facts and knowledge, but your attitude in the atmosphere of your home will be indelibly imprinted upon their spirit. It will affect their lives in future generations. The greatest education your children can receive is to see you as a living example of a godly woman showing forth the graces of Christ. And this is so true. And funny enough, a lot of times we don't clock that kind of attitude stuff until we're out in public or dealing with other people. Then we see things come out of our children's mouths that horrify us. And they horrify us usually because we realize that it's something that we said at home, not expecting for it to leave the home. So we pack back up in the car and I say, guess what, guys? Mom was wrong about that. We can't do that. Ah. On the next page is a really cool story about the keeper of the springs. And we'll just read it real fast. It's fast. Mill wheels were whirled by its rush. Oh, well, once upon a time, sorry, I should start at the beginning. Once upon a time, a certain town grew up at the foot of a mountain range. High up in the hills, a strange and quiet forest dweller took it upon himself to be the keeper of the springs. He patrolled the hills, and wherever he found a spring, he cleaned its worn pool of silt and fallen leaves, of mud and mold, and took away from the spring all foreign matter, so that the water which bubbled up through the sand ran down clean and cold and pure. It leapt sparkling over rocks and dropped joyously in crystal cascades until, swollen by other streams, it became a river of life to the busy town. Mill wheels were whirled by its rush. Gardens were refreshed by its waters. Fountains threw it like diamonds into the air. Swans sailed on its limpid surface, and children laughed as they played on its banks in the sunshine. But the city council was a group of hard-headed, hard-boiled businessmen. They scanned the civic budget and found in it the salary of a keeper of the springs. Why should we pay this romance ranger, said the keeper of the purse. We never see him. He's not necessary to our town's work life. If we build a reservoir just above town, we can dispense with his services and save his salary. Therefore, the city council voted to dispense with the unnecessary cost of the keeper of the springs and to build a cement reservoir. When it was finished, it was soon filled up with water, to be sure, but the water did not seem to be the same. It did not seem to be as clean, and green scum soon befouled its stagnant surface. There were constant troubles with the delicate machinery of the mills, for it was clogged with swans. And the swans found another home above the town. At last, an epidemic raged, and the clammy yellow fingers of sickness reached into every home in every street and lane. The city council met again. Sorrowfully, it faced the city's plight, and frankly, it acknowledged the mistake of the dismissal of the keeper of the springs. They sought him out in his hut high in the hills and begged him to return to his former joyous labor. Gladly he agreed and began once more to make his rounds. It was not long until pure water came lilting down the tunnels of ferns and mosses to sparkle in the cleansed reservoir. Mill wheels turned again as of old. Stenches disappeared. Sickness waned, and convalescent children playing in the sun laughed again because the swans had come back. I think of women, and particularly of our mothers, as keepers of the springs. So I shall make my tribute a plea for keepers of the springs who will be faithful to their tasks. There never has been a time when there was a greater need for keepers of the springs, or when there were more polluted springs to be cleansed. If the home fails, the country is doomed. The breakdown of home life and influence will cause the breakdown of the nation. If the keepers of the springs desert their posts or are unfaithful to their responsibilities, the future outlook of this country is black indeed. And that was it on that little story, which I love it. And it's so true. Who can't look around our nation today and see that so many women aren't being the mothers that they know they can be?
They've faltered at their post.
It is. It is really hard, and I think many of us that are finally realizing this came out of homes where our mothers weren't there. So it's kind of like just like starting over with very little knowledge or tools. So it's hard.
Very hard. It is very hard. Yes. So,
especially how in the beginning it says, I guess your attitude and your example are probably the most important. So not having that, sometimes you still have those same attitudes that you grew up with.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Those are some of the hardest ones to get rid of, because a lot of times they're just so ingrained in who we became as people that we don't see them. We don't see them until our children start mirroring them back to us, and then we're like, wait a minute. And
that's the same thing I wanted to avoid.
yeah, well, and don't say you want to avoid it. I mean, obviously it would be nice if we just raised perfect little sculpted children, but that's not going to happen, because we're all fallen and fallible and errant, like all of us. None of us meet the righteous requirement of God. None of us. And so,
Right.
but what we do need to remember is that when these things come up, and that when we realize that some of these things our children are doing are a reflection of us, is it's an opportunity for us to humble ourselves and allow God to refine us.
Mm-hmm.
We have to be willing. We have to be teachable. We have to be teachable. It's not about the kids being teachable. We have to be teachable. If we're not teachable and able to show some humility and do some self-examination, sometimes our children will never be that person.
Right.
So motherhood really is probably the greatest, the biggest, all day long, everyday opportunity I've ever had to continually be refined. We don't get that out in the world. I mean, you do, but not all the time, every day, like we do with raising children. She likes to talk too about the ladies, some ladies who didn't actually give birth to children, or maybe aren't mothers for whatever reason, but the fact that women still have that ingrained in them, that we all want to mother, in a sense, like it's just kind of part of what a woman is. And so at the bottom of page 51, she talks about our mothering is not confined only to our homes, but should reach out over our walls. And she says she loves Genesis 49:22. Joseph is a fruitful bough, even a fruitful bough by a well, whose branches went over the wall. Also in Psalm 128, God describes the godly wife as a vine that is planted in the recesses of the home. This is where she is planted, but a vine does not grow straight up. It spreads all over the wall. Our mothering can also reach out to others who need the anointing of the mother heart of God. Please go do your chores.
Mommy.
Yes.
Veggie steps.
Go tell David. Close the door, please. All right, and there's another little story. The greatest work, 3 masons. Once a man came upon 3 rock masons at work. What are you doing? He asked of them. I am carving these stones into the different sizes wanted, answered the first. I am earning $6 a day, replied the second. I am helping to build a great cathedral, replied the third. Only he had caught the vision of the great work that he was helping to do. Others. Once a woman came upon 3 mothers at work. What are you doing? She asked of them. I am doing the weekly washing, answered the first. I am doing a bit of household drudgery, replied the second. I am mothering 3 young children who someday will fill important and useful spheres in life, and wash day is a part of my grand task in caring for these souls who shall live forever, replied the third. Only she caught the vision of the great work she was doing. It's hard to remember that.
Yep.
Marcia, you're cracking me up. But it's true. You know, it really is true. So I find myself purposely imagining when this one's 20, you know. Well, besides being an empty nester at that point, but you know, no, I'm looking for, and when we think of our children in the future, far out, you know, we wonder, what kind of person am I raising? What kind of whiny attitudes have I instilled? Oh, you're okay. Do you need a snack? Yes, please. How about yes, please? Please. All right. We're to the questions. Hang on. Hey, David, please give this child some veggie sticks. All right. Isn't this fun?
So I have a quick question for you.
Marcia first.
Okay.
Yes.
So what exactly would you do when you notice that things are not going down quite the way you'd planned, or you thought you were cooking, and you realize that you're actually burning them instead of simmering them in a beautiful white sauce? You know what I mean? Where you're realizing that maybe you're not cooking this up right, and you're failing miserably at things that you thought maybe weren't as bad as they actually are, or I don't know, a good way to say it, I guess. Just
With,
what do you
raising the kids? You're talking about raising the kids, though, right?
Yeah.
Well, what do we do? You know, what do we do? How about this? So we're on a path, right? We're on a path.
Yep.
And all the time we're having to choose, do I go left or right? Do I do this or that? All the time we choose. And sometimes we get down this path that we've chosen and we discover that we're doing something really wrong.
We should have taken a left turn at Albuquerque.
Right. And so we can't stay where we are and correct it from there. We actually have to back up, find where we went wrong, correct it there, and then go the other direction. So you've got to do some soul searching on where that is, what part is it, and back up. And a lot of times when I do wrong parenting things, and they're really truly something I instituted that was wrong, or I had a bad day and I yelled and screamed when I shouldn't have, or something like that.
Right.
It's probably one of the most effective things that I've done pretty much my whole parenting journey. And that is, I sit my kids down around me and I apologize to them and tell them, this is what mom did wrong. This was the situation. This is my fault in it. This is what I thought was going to happen, but that wasn't right. You know, whatever it may be. That for adults to apologize and make restitution with their children, in their minds, is huge. Because a lot of kids are just raised to respect authority, and no matter what they say, anything goes, and la la la. And we teach them, listen to your mom, you know, obey your mom, obey your dad, obey the teacher, obey this, obey that. And so in a lot of these kids' minds, adults are like on this pedestal of greatness, and they don't really do wrong things. And so, to just sit them around and level with them and say, hey, I'm a person just like you, and I'm the mom, so that means that I am in charge, but I still make mistakes. That goes a long way. Huge, huge, huge. What do you think, Carolina?
I think that's true, and I've had to do it a few times with my 4-year-old now. And also just remember, just going back to her analogy on the cooking, God has also like a recipe for us for a way for us to behave, to act out. So finding out what that is, like not answering in anger, what loving our children looks like, or in that specific situation. Let's see. Remember that either way, we still have to train them. We still have to train our children. We should still discipline them, even if it means calming ourselves down first.
Yep.
But doesn't mean that we should let it go or just ignore it.
No, ignoring problems is a really bad idea. Sometimes I ignore things just because I'm trying to work out what to do with a problem. But they have, when you realize that something becomes a problem like that, you have to move it to the front burner. And I always have a list going that's called my on fire list.
I like that.
I have I keep a bullet journal, really terribly, but I try. And it's got, my daily stuff in it, our meals, our this, our whatever, okay, the calendar, my upcoming events. And of course, inevitably, I've always got a to-do list going. Well, a lot of times I'll have a moment in a week where I'm struck with this thing I have to remember that, was due yesterday. And those things, when they go on the list, they go to a list that I always just label on fire. And if I've got a fire brewing in my house with my family, everything else moves off the list until I fix it. You have to.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And that usually comes with a lot of prayer.
Yes.
And just being quiet. You being quiet and still and really trying to absorb what's really going on so that you can make a good decision.
Right.
Yeah, that's hard. That's hard stuff. Okay. Carolina, what were you going to say?
I guess going back to the section where it talks about branching out, or just, what is it called, going over the walls.
Yeah.
I think a good example for that would be for ourselves to be hospitable. And I think that is a great way to show our children how to serve others with whatever we have, even if it's just a little bit.
Agreed.
Just going back to Jesus' example on serving others. So I think that is also a great tool in raising our children.
Absolutely. And that's another beauty of being able to stay home. Even though we're really probably the busiest people, we also have maybe the most opportunity to reach out to others because of our placement. So I don't like to squash those opportunities,
Mhm.
Of course, there's seasons where I just can't even get out of my own four walls, but there's other seasons where we get to do great things to help others, which is nice. All right, the first question is, it said, write down or share how rebellion, bitterness, unforgiveness, or even a grumbling spirit can affect our children. Can you share examples? Well, I could write a set of books, I think. Oh, but it does. Like I said in the beginning, they mirror what we do. So I've got a couple of them out there right now that are, but it's probably how I talked to them before I came in here with my coffee. Like,
Somebody once told me that children are sponges, and you can only get out of a sponge what you put into a sponge. And I really kind of liked that because it is really, really accurate.
it is. And that's very simple. That's a perfect parallel. That's perfect.
Yep.
So does anybody want to share examples of your children being affected by your rebellion? I think we'll plead the fifth. We don't have to give examples, but we all know we do it, don't we?
Yes, we've been called out on it a couple times too.
Yeah, sometimes I'm called out in very uncomfortable ways. So that's not fun. All right, number 2. What positives or negatives have you picked up from your own upbringing, and how has this affected your own life? Marcia, did we lose you? Uh-oh. She'll call back in. Go ahead, Carolina.
Well, I think in positives is probably more like in taking care of the home, but negatives is I do find myself having a hard time building a relationship with my children, which I have to be a little bit more conscious about it to make sure that I am doing something. I have to make it happen. It's just not something that because I feel like I can go on with like changing a diaper or giving them a bath without connecting, kind of just doing it.
Yes.
Rushing through, kind of.
Yeah.
So just being more intentional about even when I am probably just changing their clothes, maybe having a conversation or pointing out certain things. I guess it's not being so cold about it. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yes. No, that makes perfect sense. And a lot of that happens, okay, there's plenty of reasons for that. Number 1, be nice to ourselves and just remember that we're doing this 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We don't get to clock out or go on vacation or whatever. We just don't. And so it's who can do that? Who can be on their A+ game 100% of the time, all the time? Nobody.
All the time.
Nobody can. So cut yourself some slack, okay? Cut yourself some slack. And it's okay if you're not super awesome, bouncy, happy-go-lucky, fabulous mom all day long, all the time. It's okay. It's okay to look at your children and set a timer and say, I'm setting this timer for 30 minutes, and you're going to go play in your room nicely for 30 minutes. And when this timer beeps, then mommy will read you a book. That's okay. It's okay. Like, you have permission to do that. As a matter of fact, it's good for them. So,
Right.
but you're right. In other times, there's moments where we really should be working on building something up with our kids, and we're not. We're being selfish. We're tuned out. We're whatever for wrong reasons. And it's hard, man. This is the hardest job I've ever had.
Sometimes it is just the, I guess what I'm saying is sometimes it's easier just to keep that attitude all day where you're just kind of blocking everybody out.
Yeah.
So you have to just kind of force, think about it and tune back in. And even if it's just like maybe once a day while you're trying to handle everything else going on around you.
Yes. Marcia, did you come back? Marcia, I see that you're here, but I can't hear you. Oh, that's okay. Maybe she's fumbling around for her audio. Oh, no audio on the computer. Okay, well, she's here listening. That's good. Okay, let's see. 2 more questions. Number 3, share how your daily faithfulness in the home can affect the nation. That's a big one. I can remember when my firstborn was a teeny tiny baby and we had just barely gotten home from the hospital. And I had all this time to just sit and stare at this thing that came out of my body. And I can remember looking at him and thinking, oh my gosh, like, what are you going to be? Like, what are you going to do when you're old? And like, I really had a huge moment of that. Like, what am I going to do to, how am I going to affect who you are? And that was really awesome and awesome in both ways, in the really great way and in the really fearful way. Like, it's both exhilarating and terrifying.
I think it is important to keep that in mind all the time. But probably the biggest way you can influence them is like it's been mentioning in the book, is just to live out a godly life for them.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think you're very, very right. And that brings us to the last part here, the last question, which is, what do you think are the greatest ways to influence our children? And I definitely think, of course, we want to be walking the walk, not just saying it, but being doers, not just hearers. And specifically in the area of being teachable and being humble, showing humility,
Right.
and extending grace not only to ourselves but to them. There's a lot of hard choices that have to be made in the area of discipline. Sometimes I sit around and I go, okay. Sometimes I think, this was an offense that really needs to have a consequence. But sometimes my go-to consequence, maybe that's not the right fit. And instead, I show mercy on them. And the next time a fun treat thing comes up, I choose the child that was the big offender that day. And it always surprises them. Mom, why would you pick me? And I have an opportunity there to show mercy on them and explain to them what that is, what it looks like, and you're the lucky recipient today of my grace, and so come on, you get a piece of bubble gum or something. And those little things, those little micro managerial decisions seem to have greater bearing than the overarching, okay, and today we, overarching daily stuff like it's morning time at 7 a.m. We do our chores, we brush our teeth, we sit down for breakfast at 8, at 9 o'clock we do this, at 1 o'clock, okay. Yeah, those things, the day-to-day grind, of course, has a bearing on forming good habits and that sort of thing, but it's actually the little teeny tiny stuff that seems to carry bigger weight.
Right. I can see that probably my daughter, because she is really whiny. Something always hurts.
Yes.
So it does get hard to respond to her in a loving way.
Yes.
Like trying to feel for her. And so I do see her when somebody else is in pain, she doesn't really know how to react. She'll come and tell me, but I wish I could see more compassion in her, and I think probably just acknowledging every when she does come to me will probably make a bigger difference.
Yeah.
Than trying to talk to her through it and tell her, it's okay, everybody gets hurt. But I guess just taking that minute to just love on her will make more of a difference on how she reacts to other people too.
Yeah, and that'll come. She's young. She's young. She'll learn it. She'll learn it. You're modeling it. She's going to learn it. And she's young. You're going to see the fruits of all of this as she gets older. And it's hard. It's hard when you have a child that's oftentimes not healthy. Because it shades how you parent them some, because sometimes you don't know if they're acting out because there's actually something wrong.
Right. Yeah.
Or if it's really just a character flaw that you need to help them with. And that makes parenting really hard to know when to come down on them in a disciplined sort of way, or when to just bring them in closer because they're hurting. That's hard. That's really hard.
And I know eventually as she gets older, she'll probably see that, we still do show love to her and taking care of her and, being up at night with her.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Yep. I think you're doing all the right things. And yeah, just keep plugging away.
Yeah.
Inner washing and drudgery and building a nation or a cathedral or whatever it is we're building. Okay, this was good. I'm so glad you ladies joined me this morning. And like I said earlier, this is going to be the way we do it now every week. And I think consistency will be key. And I'm actually having a lot of fun to see who's going to join in for the day. But there's plenty of room on this. We could have 20 of us here. It wouldn't matter. And any which way you all want to do it. Video on, video off, if you just want to listen in. We can actually also open a chat function on the side where, for those of you who didn't want to be on video or didn't want to speak either, you could kind of type in stuff on the side. That would be fine. But I'm hoping this turns into this cool thing where we can gather some of our friends that are in different states. So I'm looking forward to this format going forward. Next week, a week from now, is Chapter 8. Mothers are nation changers. And again, this is 1, 2, 3, 4. It's actually 3 pages and then a poem. It's short. It's only 4 questions again. And it's kind of in the same line of thinking as where we were going today with thinking forward into the future. So you guys do your homework and set your alarms for next week, and we'll do this again in a week.
Sounds good.
Thank you so much for joining us this
Thank you.
morning. Yep, I'll see you next week.
Yes, thank you for your time. Have a good day.
Yes, you too. Goodbye.
Goodbye.